everybody, I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. Joining me now is Republican strategist and former chair of the Montana Republican Party, Erik Iverson. Erik, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany. Great to see you.
It is great to see you too, and I want to talk to our viewers about where we are right now. Super Tuesday was last night. It is Wednesday afternoon. Just a few hours ago, Nikki Haley did suspend her presidential campaign after winning just one primary last night and one before in this 2024 primary season so far. So as we sit here, what are your takeaways from the night?
Look, I think, with Nikki Haley dropping out this morning, it was the right decision. I mean, look, that was always a matter of, not ever a matter of if, but when it was going to happen. And it finally happened this morning. I think it's the right decision. It's hard to make the case to your staff, to your voters, to your donors, when you get almost swept on Super Tuesday. And the only state you win is Vermont, where there was probably a lot of Democrats voting anyway. It's hard kind of with a straight face to say, hey, there's light at the end of the tunnel here. There's a path to victory. So I think she did the right thing this morning. I think it was the inevitable thing, and it's the right decision.
What is Nikki Haley's political future in a party that is resoundingly a Trump GOP now?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, look, she obviously has a subset of voters who like her. A subset of voters who do respond to her brand of republicanism. And in politics, maybe and perhaps most importantly, she can raise money. I mean, her super PAC raised real money. She raised real money. If she can keep those donors sort of, on the team, I think she can stay viable into the future. So look, she has a voter base. She has a donor base. Those are two pretty big boxes to check. Now, the question being her lane in the GOP primary, say if she were to run in 2028, what's that look like? It may be too narrow for her to win, but I think certainly she has shown that she can resonate with some of the electorate and some of the donors.
Where do those Nikki Haley voters go? I think that's the big question now everyone's asking, because as news broke that Nikki Haley did suspend her campaign, President Biden released this statement in part, quote, Donald Trump made it clear he doesn't want Nikki Haley's supporters. I want to be clear, there is a place for them in my campaign. Where are these voters going? Do you see your average Nikki Haley voter supporting Biden over Trump or vice versa? What does that look like?
First of all, I saw that statement from the president's campaign. I think it was smart, right? I mean, he needs to try and gather up, some sort of right-leaning independents, maybe some moderate Republicans to cobble together a coalition. Because let's face it, Joe Biden's losing right now. I mean, even the New York Times poll showed him down 5. So he needs all the votes that he can get. And so I think it's smart for him to strike a conciliatory tone. I don't think it's going to work, however. I mean, like, those Nikki Haley voters are not going to all of a sudden say, you know what, the border's wonderful, the economy's great, I love what you're doing, in Israel and in Ukraine, and I love the Afghanistan withdrawal, and everything's really safe and great in my community, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. That's not going to happen. I mean, I think it's smart for Biden to swing for the fences with it, but I think at the end of the day, these are Republicans, many of whom have voted for Donald Trump in the past, and if they had an alternative, they got the chance to voice their opposition to Trump, to say, I like this sort of brand of republicanism a little bit better. But at the end of the day, this has now become, moving into the general election, it's a referendum on the last 4 years of the Biden presidency. And there aren't very many Republicans of any stripe, or even right-leaning independents of any stripe, that are now going to go and cast their ballot for Joe Biden. I just don't see it happening.
Nikki Haley, in her speech where she was suspending her campaign, she didn't say she was supporting and endorsing the former president. However, after she dropped out, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell did say that he now endorses former President Donald Trump. What do you make of that endorsement?
Yeah, I think that, the McConnell endorsement is important because mostly because the national media wants to just talk about a rift between the Senate minority leader and the former president. They love the narrative of Republicans fighting and all of that. So this takes that off the table. It's consistent with what Mitch McConnell said. He's going to support the nominee. It's very clear now that, if it hasn't been clear to people before, after Trump almost sweeping Super Tuesday, it's very clear to everyone he is going to be the nominee. I think it's smart of McConnell to do that, clear the decks. I think Nikki Haley should do it too. There's no reason not to. At this point, I think it's actually good for her future, if she wants a future in this party, to go ahead and make that endorsement right now. But look, I think it's smart that McConnell did it, and I think it takes away that narrative the national press wants to have, because really the party infighting, the candidate who's got a problem with his own party, and last night really showed this, is Joe Biden. I mean, think about it. 20% went to uncommitted, sort of like none of the above versus Joe Biden in Minnesota, a state that he has to win, a state that could be in play with those sorts of numbers. We saw what happened to him in Michigan, where undeclared, got into the double digits. And we saw that time and time again. There were several states last night where somebody other than Joe Biden, a nameless, uncommitted line on a ballot, got double digits against a sitting United States president. That's remarkable. And so if you want to talk about inter-party strife, I would say at the presidential level, it's with the Democrats right now, not the Republicans.
You mentioned that this general election, at least on the GOP side, is a referendum on the last 4 years of the Biden administration. And it seems right now, since the presumptive nominees are former President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden, the strategy seems to be pick me because the other guy's worse. Is this a winning strategy?
I don't think it's a winning strategy for either side. I don't believe that that's going to ultimately be the Trump strategy. I think the Trump strategy is going to be sort of like, like Reagan in 1980. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Do you like what's happening with the border? Do you like what's happening with our foreign policy? Do you like what's happening with crime and public safety and homelessness and the cost of housing and the cost of groceries and the cost of, of just living and getting by? I really think that Donald Trump has a record, 4-year record as president, that is not only better from a policy perspective than Joe Biden's, but I think it's better from a public opinion standpoint than Joe Biden's. If you ask people, were they better off under Trump or Biden, in all sorts of national surveys, you're seeing voters of all stripes saying, listen, the 4 years of Donald Trump were better for me personally, better for my family personally, better for my business, better for our country than the last 4 years. And I think that's the case that Donald Trump will make. I think it's a successful argument. I think it's a smart argument. And I think it's an argument people are going to buy. The problem for Biden is he has to try and sell people on something they don't believe. Like, you have to say, hey, ignore your eyes, people, your lion eyes, ignore those lion eyes. Everything is great. That guy is chaos. That guy's trouble. You don't want a repeat of that. And I think voters right now are saying, hey, listen, for me personally, things were better under the other guy. And that's the problem that Biden's going to run into.
Donald Trump, though, does have a losing record when it comes to recent elections. He lost the White House in 2020. Democrats won the House and Senate also in 2020. And Donald Trump was largely blamed for that red wave that failed to materialize in the 2022 midterms. So do you think the GOP right now is supporting a losing candidate? Does he have a pathway to victory?
Well, first of all, in 2022, Republicans did take back the House of Representatives. So look, these things can pendulum swing, but it's not a losing record. It's not that Donald Trump can't help Republicans win national elections. We took back control of the House. The Senate is very closely divided. I think right now, the Republicans are in a great position, thanks to the leadership of Senator Daines and the Republican Senatorial Committee, to take back control of the Senate. And look, this whole notion that Trump can't help the party, Trump can't win, poll after poll after poll is showing Trump beating Biden. It's showing Trump overperforming past results among Hispanic voters, among African-American voters, among women. New York Times poll, not exactly a bastion of conservative thought, right? The New York Times poll had Donald Trump basically statistically tied with Joe Biden among women. If Joe Biden does not win women voters by at least double digits, the math doesn't work for him to win the presidency. So look, I think Donald Trump's in a great spot. And, campaigns like this, when you have an incumbent up, it ultimately comes down to a referendum on the incumbent. And that's what people are going to be voting on. And is the last 4 years better than the previous 4 years? And I think, record wise, the American public right now is saying we like things better under Donald Trump than we do Joe Biden.
What's really interesting is that this is a 2020 sequel, and we can compare and contrast 4 years under Trump versus the other 4 years under President Biden. But something that the majority of Americans don't want is this 2020 sequel. So I am curious, how does this lack of excitement around candidates, because according to a recent Harris X poll, 64% of voters don't want Biden to run again, 53% of voters don't want Trump again. So how is this lack of excitement around both candidates affecting the general? Who do you think it's going to hurt more?
Well, it's interesting too, because all those polls say people don't want Biden versus Trump, but that's not how they're voting, right? They're going to the primary polls and they're voting for these guys. So that's where we're at. And I think, look, from a momentum standpoint, from an enthusiasm standpoint, what I'm seeing in polling across the country, what I'm seeing from the polling that I conduct for our candidates and our clients, is there is a big enthusiasm gap between Trump supporters and Biden supporters. Trump supporters are voting for Donald Trump because they like him and they like his policies. The problem for Biden is there's a certain segment of the Biden voter who is saying, I'm only voting for him because I don't like Donald Trump. It's really hard. It's not impossible, but it's more difficult to turn somebody out to vote against someone than for someone. And that's the challenge of the Biden campaign right now. When you don't have much of a record to run on, you have to sort of try and demonize the other guy. It's really difficult, though, to turn out voters. He's struggling with younger voters right now. Younger voters may just take a walk on the entire election, not vote at all. That's bad news for Joe Biden. He's struggling with African-American men. That's bad news with Joe Biden. Hispanic voters all over the country are moving toward Donald Trump, and as a result, Republicans overall. Those are key coalitions that Joe Biden's struggling with right now, and that will have serious down-ballot implications for Democrats if, for example, Biden can't win Hispanics. If, for example, Biden can't win African Americans with 85 to 88 or so percent of the vote. I mean, if that African American male vote, if Trump can get up into the 18, 20, 23% of the African American male vote, math gets real difficult for Biden.
I am curious, why are we seeing these demographics rather moving more towards the right?
I think it's because, Joe Biden wants this campaign, and he's talked about it, been very open about it, and we'll see, State of the Union tomorrow night. He wants to talk about threats to democracy, and this campaign is going to be about democracy and threats to democracy and all that. The challenge that he has is voters are almost exclusively self-interested. Voters are selfish. They vote for what's in their own best interest. And when they're struggling to pay the rent, when they're seeing crime, and young girls can't go for a jog at the University of Georgia campus without being attacked. They're seeing fentanyl killing 70,000 Americans a year. They're seeing what's going on with our border and the price of food and the price of housing. And Joe Biden's talking about sort of this existential 30,000-foot threat to democracy. The average voter is going to be like, yeah, I mean, I like democracy. I'm an American. I get it. But I'm having trouble paying the rent. And my community that used to be safe, I can't walk around in anymore. I think voters, it's a dangerous and very risky path for Biden. Might be the only path he has because he can't really talk about a lot of accomplishments. But voters are going to vote in their own self-interest. And right now, the things that voters care about are aspects of Biden's policies that just are failing and aren't working.
I am very curious about the economy, because when I talk to voters all the way from Iowa to Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, a resounding theme I hear is, my groceries are more expensive than they were before. My wallet hurts. It's tough for me to put food on the kitchen table. So 62% of voters, according to a recent Harris X Forbes poll, believe that the economy is somewhat or very weak. But by all numbers, the economy is doing better than it was a year ago. Do you think the lag time of the sentiment from when people can feel the economy is doing better, which usually is about 6 to 8 months, according to strategists, of when people can feel the economy doing better, do you think that's going to work out in Biden's favor? Because if you count 6 to 8 months from now, that's close to November.
Yeah, I think a couple things. People aren't going to look at it like now versus a year from now. They're going to look at it now like 4 years ago. And those same polls are saying people believe that their own personal financial situation was better than it is now. Now maybe by November it's improved a little bit, but they're still going to lay the economic woes that they have faced the last 3.5 years at the feet of Joe Biden. And again, I would say, you're talking to voters. The Forbes survey is talking to voters in the issues that they care about, and it's wallet stuff, it's pocketbook issues. You're probably not getting a lot of people citing January 6th and threats to democracy. That's sort of what left-leaning and inside the Beltway political strategists want to make this about, because they don't have a great record to run on. But it's not where voters' heads are at right now. It's just not. I'm not saying that with hundreds of millions of dollars in advertising, maybe they can get enough people to care about it. But that's a tough sled when people are very, very concerned about how they're going to support their family. And you want to talk about sort of these sort of amorphous threats to democracy. That's the challenge the Biden campaign has. They've got to try and connect the dot to a threat to democracy, to you, Joe and Susan voter in America, why that's a bigger problem for you than the cost of housing, than public safety, than the border. That's a tough sled.
To your point, the top three issues were immigration, inflation, and the economy. So all tangible issues, two of them being kitchen table issues. I would love to pick your brain about one race that was really interesting last night in California, Senate race there. Adam Schiff and Steve Garvey won the most votes in their primary, and they will be facing off in November. I am curious, Steve Garvey's a Republican. Does a Republican have a chance winning a Senate race in a liberal state like California?
Well, I mean, the answer is yes. It can be done in California. I mean, take David Valadao in California's 22nd congressional district. That is a Biden plus, a Democrat plus 13 district by voter registration. David Valadao wins that district, and he's coming out on top in that primary right now by about 6 percentage points. So it can be done. Now, you have to have smart messaging. You have to have a good candidate. And you have to have a good strategy. You have to be able to raise money. It can absolutely be done. Now, I mean, obviously, the problem in California is Democrat registration over Republican is 2-1 on the hardcores, Democrats versus Republican. But there is a big chunk of that California electorate that calls themselves NPP voters, no party preference voters. Those voters, those independent voters, we're seeing this all over the country. You mentioned the top three issues. One of those top three issues is immigration. We're seeing immigration triple and quadruple in terms of the most important issue to independent voters. And when you look at where Joe Biden's at, the head of the ticket among those people who cite immigration as their top issue, I mean, he's at barely in double digits in an approval rating. His disapproval ratings are in the 70s and 80s. So look, do you kind of have to catch a wave to win in California these days? Yes. Can it be done? Absolutely. David Valadao has proved it. John Duarte in California 13 is proving it. There are other Republicans who are winning in Democrat congressional districts in that state. So yes, you can cobble together a coalition. It's going to be tough, right? From a fundraising standpoint, it's a big state to message, but it can be done. It can definitely be done.
So you're saying uphill battle, but it is doable.
It's doable, particularly, if you've got a weak top of the ticket, which, Adam Schiff's going to be dealing with a weak presidential candidate that's going to be a drag, not necessarily on Democrats, but on independent voters, those NPP voters in California. They're really going to be the key. And, if I'm the Garvey campaign, that's where I'm going. We're going to get Republicans because it's Adam Schiff, right? He led the impeachment of Donald Trump and all that, a highly partisan Democrat. I'm going right in on micro-targeting and data modeling and polling of those NPP voters, figure out what issues make them tick, and talk to them constantly for the next 6 months. And if you do that and you raise money, you got a chance to catch lightning in a bottle.
By most metrics, the results out of Super Tuesday were pretty predictable. But did you read the tea leaves for us a bit, any warning signs for either Democrats or Republicans?
I think the warning signs we talked a little bit about earlier, for Joe Biden, the warning signs are, those double digits of uncommitted voters showing up. I mean, they weren't even choosing another candidate. They were just saying, I don't want you. I'm literally going to check a box for anybody but Joe Biden. And to have a sitting Democrat president in a Democrat primary registering almost 1 out of 5 primary voters in a state like Minnesota that's been pretty reliably Democrat. I think Nixon's the last president, maybe Republican, to have won Minnesota. To now have 1 out of 5 Democrat voters saying, "I'll take anybody but the current president," that to me is a pretty big warning sign.
Erik Iverson, thank you so much for your insights. I hope you join me again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brittany. Have a great day.